All right, so we left off here with this model sort of saying, well, this might explain why women choose to go into certain careers, maybe more flexible with entering and exiting the labor force, things like this. And then I was talking about the wage gap. So if you try and determine why men make more than women, one of the big reasons is indeed these choices. So women are choosing to go into jobs that pay less, and maybe one of the reasons is because it's easier to come in and out of, cycle in and out of the labor market when you have kids. The other thing to note is we have a big part of the wage gap that's unexplained, and this means that you can add in all the control variables you want, but you still can't figure it out. So what might go into the unexplained wage gap? It could be commute times, right? Maybe women choose shorter commutes, so that's lower paying jobs. It could be straight up discrimination. Hey, we're not going to pay women the same amount for what a man does. Maybe women are not quite as good at negotiating. It could be lots of things. But one thing that, when you look at the evidence, and of course it's really hard to find evidence of something that's unexplained, there is discrimination. We see these experiments. If you send a resume with a woman's name and a man's name, the woman's less likely to get the job. We actually know that's also true with course evaluations. In an online course taught by someone who's named a woman or a man, the exact same course, the man will get higher course evaluations. So there's certainly some evidence for discrimination in the labor market. But the more I learn about it, the more I think a lot of it has to do with Golden's interview that you're going to be listening to, which is greedy jobs. And so basically, if you've got a husband and a wife, and the husband chooses the greedy job where he has to be on call all the time, working super long hours, the wife probably can't also do that. And so one of them has to step back. Traditionally in our society, it's the woman. And I don't know that that's like an irrational choice, right? Because if women are making less money than men, that would make more sense for them to step back, right? So basically, we've got a few things going on here with COVID. We've got daycares are closing, right? Women are doing more unpaid labor. So my argument here is that I think we might see an exacerbation of women choosing flexible jobs. We might see more women leave the labor force because they have to, right? Because daycare is more expensive, and then when they return, their wages might be lower than before. And I think this might also present itself in the occupational industry category. Women might choose to go into industries where it's easier to cycle in and out. And I also think a lot of this is going to show up in the unexplained wage gap. Women are choosing more flexible jobs, shorter commutes, whatever, because of COVID. There's just more childcare to be done, and so I think we're going to see the wage gap get bigger. That's my prediction. Now, turning to race. And I don't know about you, if you're super comfortable teaching race and economics. I was not. What happened is I was asked to teach the economics of race and gender. I didn't go to any school that taught me anything about race in my entire life, right? I was just an economist. But I offered to teach it. I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And basically what I've learned throughout the years is that it's important to learn about just as a member of society, but also as an economist, right? So if you're looking at, say, just an unemployment report, which you guys have done, right? Pull up our unemployment report here. I also think it's table 2. Yeah. So if we look at the white unemployment rate, right now it's 3.2%. If you look at the black unemployment rate, it's 5.9%. It's always about double. And if you look at the Hispanic or Latino unemployment rate, it's 4.1. And actually, if you look at the Asians, sometimes Asians usually lower. But it's like, okay, this seems to be an economic issue, right? So there's something going on here economically. And so, again, I've taught a whole class on this, and I've learned all of this stuff. I think it comes down to a few things. Number one, it comes down to something called redlining, which I'll talk about. Number 2 comes down to differences in education. Well, we might see how COVID might play a part in the education thing. It comes down to employment rates. If you want to study the unemployment, you have to look at the employment population ratio, which is lower for black men. And I think one of the reasons it's lower for black men is incarceration rates. So at its peak, a black man would have a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison in his lifetime. A Latino man would be 1 in 6, and a white man would be 1 in 17. So there's just a lot of black and Latino men in prison, and when you leave prison, it's very, very hard to find a job. So I'll leave this to you. You're welcome to research it on your own, but I am going to bring up the concept of redlining. All right, and so redlining is something I didn't know about. Apparently you guys are teaching it in school, because when I taught this class in 2014, people did not know about it. 2012, people did not know about it. Almost all the students knew about it this time. So basically what redlining is when our soldiers came back from World War II, there was like a housing boom, right? And we were building houses in the suburbs a lot. And so what happened is the Federal Housing Administration offered guidelines for assessing the riskiness of houses, right? So if basically guidelines for whether the house should be given a loan. The person should be given a loan to buy a house in a certain area. And these guidelines were very much based on race. And so the University of Richmond, this is one of my favorite resources. If you look at the city of Chicago, let's pull up this map here. You can see the areas that were redlined. And redline basically meant you couldn't get a loan for a house. Too risky to get a loan for the house. The yellow was like borderline, and the green was like, it's good to go. And if anyone's familiar with Chicago, you'll see, whoa, that's the south side and the west side, right? And so what you can do is you can click on these certain areas. And this is located between 35th and 67th, this area, a blighted area, 100% Negro. This venture has the realtors guessing as to what the ultimate result will be when so many of this race are already drawn into this section from the already Negro blighted district. I mean, it gives you goosebumps, right? And I didn't even plan this. I just randomly clicked on one. Play around with this, you guys. It is nasty. So basically, yeah, look at this. There's about a dozen colored families on Carpenter and Aberdeen. Probably the best residential district. I mean, it's just so explicitly racist. If there are black people in your neighborhood or other immigrants, it was actually very anti-immigrant as well, you couldn't get a loan. And if you can't get a loan, what happens is your housing value is very, very low, right? So, Opportunity Atlas. So there's this source by Raj Chetty, and you guys might be familiar with this. Basically what he does is he covers upward mobility. So if you grow up in certain neighborhoods, what is your upward mobility likely to be? And you can play around with this. But if you look at Chicago, for example. Yeah. All right, I'm actually going to pause this and pull it up. All right, so you guys can play around with this, but basically I've got household income. So if you grew up in these neighborhoods, and it was like in 1983, and the reason I know that is that's when I grew up in my neighborhood, so it's like my cohort. If you grew up in these neighborhoods, your household income at age 35, look at the redlined neighborhoods, right? South and west side of Chicago, you can pull up the redlining maps. It's so similar. And so we can kind of see this legacy today. If you grow up in a redlined neighborhood, your income's likely to be lower, you're more likely to have pollution around you, and perhaps most importantly, your wealth is likely to be much, much lower. Actually, I'd encourage you guys, if any of you are from South Bend, to explore South Bend. There's some really interesting things happening over there. But if you live in a redlined neighborhood, you're less likely to own your house. If you do own your house, the value is low. What happens then is as things appreciate over time, right, housing values appreciate, What happened with the redlining neighborhoods is they did not appreciate. And in fact, when this became illegal to do in the 70s, that's when it became illegal, it was the 70s. What happened is massive white flight. And so if a black family moved into a neighborhood, white people moved out, caused a double shift of supply and demand, and housing values remained quite low. And as you guys know, schools, parks, whatever is funded by housing values, okay? So we just see a tremendous discrepancy in redlined areas versus non-redlined areas. So when you're looking at the black, white, or Hispanic white wealth gap, and you say, oh my God, how is it so high? Keep in mind that housing is a big part of wealth. And if you're in a redlined neighborhood, you're at a tremendous disadvantage for housing. You also are less likely to have gone to a good school or a well-funded school. Okay, so I'm going to be honest here. I was actually planning on giving you this as required reading and perusal, but because it's pre-COVID, I just don't know that it's something I feel comfortable making you read. So I am going to pull out just a few things on this in terms of wealth. So this is a Federal Reserve survey. In the 2019 survey, white families have the highest level of median and mean family wealth. If you look at the difference between median and mean, you see it's massive, and that's because of what we call a long tail. There's some super rich families skewing the data. So let's look at the median. 188,200 wealth. This includes your housing values. All right. Black families' median wealth is 24,000. So I got my little calculator here. Let's do a little division. So 7.8 times. So usually we see something like this, depending on the survey. White wealth is 8 times higher than black wealth. This is 7.8 here. We can also see Hispanic families' wealth is 36,000. So 188 divided by 36. So that's 5 times higher. And so we just see tremendous wealth discrepancies. So when I'm talking about the economics of like different races, I do look at unemployment rates, I do look at incomes, but man, I'm looking at wealth, okay? And so I think that's like just to set us up for, hey, we're going into COVID here. So we're going into COVID, we've got tremendous wealth discrepancies, all of these things. Okay, so COVID hits. So I asked my race and gender students to do some research, and this is what they came up with. It was very helpful, so I'm going to start with this. All right, so the unemployment peak, which was 14.7%, we've looked at it together. Black unemployment peaked at 17.5. Hispanic unemployment peaked even higher at 19.6 versus white at 14.6. So what was happening is the industries that were hit, it was service industries, it was just industries that were more heavily Hispanic. So we see differences in labor market outcomes here. All right, blacks with a high school diploma or less experienced unemployment at a staggering 22.3% in April of 2020, a rate that largely holds at around 20% through August 2020 before hitting a second plateau. That's like Great Depression bad, right? And so when we start looking at the different educational groups within the races, we see even more discrepancies. Hispanic and black women accounted for much of the decrease in labor force participation among women. Unemployment remained more elevated among black and Hispanic workers. Workers in low-wage jobs experienced the greatest drop in employment. So when you look at just like the gender pay gap, that's for all races. But once you start looking at different races, it gets more, there's like the gap is bigger. And we can see here, once we dive down into the labor force participation thing, we see a difference in Hispanic and black. All right, so I'm going to leave it here and then start one more recording.